Hello, welcome to the Oberheim OB-Xa tutorial. Today we're having a look at the rest of the controls that we haven't dealt with in the main synth, the master and voices sections. Master first, most of these are really straightforward, volume is volume, come on now. The hold button, when we engage that, each note that I press is now held down and it will keep on adding until it gets to its voice maximum. Now the synth is currently set to 8. So the low C is just about to get thrown away. There it went. So it basically adds notes up to its voice maximum and then from that point onwards throws the oldest one away. When we engage chord mode, at the moment it's just going to play a C. If I press C2, it plays the C2. But if I press the cell button, it gives us this little highlighted option where we can specify what offsets we want to be played every time we play a note. So now when I press C, it's going to play C major. Now it's going to repeat those intervals, the major third and minor third, for every subsequent note. So if I play a D, that's played a D and then an F sharp. So it's not staying in the key of C. The synthesizer has no idea what scale I'm in. It's purely intervals. Major third plus minor third, so that's going to be D, F sharp, the F sharp and A. Those three notes that get played. So don't fall into the habit of thinking it only ever plays white notes. It doesn't. It's all about intervals. And master tune. Again, really straightforward in semitones, and double click to set it back to 0. The voices section is much more interesting and involved. First of all, detune. Now detune on its own has a very unspectacular effect. If I play C and let the synth settle down at basically 0, turn detune all the way up, you get a very, very minor amount of detune. That's not what this is all about. What this is all about is when we engage the magnificent unison mode. Because when we turn unison on, well, I'll just press a note with no detune. You get a very different shape. We're not playing the simple sawtooth. I have added a little bit of filtering to this because I'm not friends with sawtooths at the moment, but it's made a much more complex shape, which will come alive when I begin increasing the detune knob. Unison is magical. So what's happening there is all of the voices available to the synthesizer are all being poured into that note. But rather than playing exactly the same note identically, which it was doing when we had detune set to 0, there's tiny microscopic variations, hence the colouring of the tone. When we increase the detune knob, then it starts spreading those notes out over a wider range and we get some really beautiful effects. And that's called Unison Detune. And you can hear it in motion because all of the notes are out of tune, out of pitch with each other. They're all basically like just waving. You get this really glorious effect. Unison Detune is magnificent. Now, saying that it uses all the voices available to it is true in default mode. If I click the little settings cog, can you see in the settings page, we've got a couple of options that are relevant, and they have been relevant at various stages when we've dealt with number of voices, but I've chosen now to talk about it because we can actually increment or change, decrement and increment the poly count on this synth. So we can make it genuinely monophonic if we want, or we can give it up to 16 voices. And this is the thing. Remember when we had our portamento effect and we were kind of fixated on 8 voices? This is the reason. But why I've chosen it today to talk about it in particular is because we've got a unison mode as well. Now, when unison is the same number as poly, it means all of the voices available to the synth get directed to that note. But if I turn unison down to 4, I can play a 2-note chord and each of them will have 4 voices. Or if my CPU's up to it, I can go to 16 and now I can play a 4-note chord and everything will be quadded. And this is where modern synthesizers just, you know, beat old world analog synths hands down. So that's 16 voices doing something pretty amazing right there. Let's get back to our standard setup and shut that window back down and have a look at these options down below. And there's some hidden depths here. First of all, because pan happens to be the one that's selected, let's deal with that first. We have this spread knob. Oh, I'll turn unison off, sorry. That when I increase it, does nothing at all. That's because at the moment, the secret hidden pan controls are all set to 12 o'clock. Let's find the secret hidden pan controls. If we hover in this area of the keyboard, you might just be able to see some ghost controls appear, and an IntelliSense thing appears at the bottom as well. Click here to access pan spread trimmer controls. Well, let's do that. And this little section contains our pan options. The reason it's been done like this, by the way, you used to be able to take get into the internal components of the synthesizer and with a screwdriver adjust these 8 pots on the original. Kind of cool. Now, if I set each one of these voices to a different value, I'll just do the first 4. Of course, I happen to be at voice 5, absolutely typical. So the next couple of notes that I play are all going to be panned absolutely central, but the next note that I play is going to be panned, let's make it extreme. Hard right, hard left, hard right, hard left. And then 4 in the centre. Now, that's the effect at its maximum because of the spread control. If I turn this back down, they're all centralized again. So the master spread knob determines how much these pan knobs are allowed to affect the pan. How cool is that? In stereo mode, we get a new secret compartment. Again, if I click in the lower half of this control box, it disappears, and most of the time you can't even see that these controls are here. Let's open it up and see what's going on here. Now, when we're in stereo mode, spread takes on a very special function, and you need to have spread engaged in order for any of this stuff to do anything. What happens here is that basically the oscillators are duplicated. So this is effectively getting 2 OB-Xs for 1. And the controls in this little subsection allow us to determine how offset the oscillator and filter controls, more specifically, that's what gets duplicated. So let's deal with the oscillator first. What I'm going to do is, first of all, play a note. Okay, now I'll turn oscillator all the way up to maximum, and can you see these little 2 blue bars represent graphically what's going on? Now play the same C2. So those 2 oscillators, these 2 independent oscillators, have been slightly offset in pitch. And we can do the same with the filter bank, which is why we started with some filter engaged. Let's turn that up. Now each note that I play has slight variations in the oscillator, in the pitch, and slight variations in the filter cutoff. But we can do more, because we can vary the rate of change of those modulations with these little movement controls down here. What I'm going to do is set the rate to 12 o'clock and introduce some amount. And you can see these little bars starting to move. I'll just pull back on the maximums a little. And now we can see that the oscillator and filter variances, differences between the 2 either oscillator banks or filter banks cutoffs, are being modulated. And this is all within the context of the stereo field. So That's just an absolutely glorious sound now. But there's more. We've got an LFO control here as well. If I introduce some LFO variants and allow the modulation bank, because this is where our LFO is configured, I patch it into filter frequency. What we're going to get now is panning of the LFO offsets. So you're going to hear the LFO sweep down in one ear and sweep up in the other ear, and it basically alters the phase. There we go. Just magnificent. So we're getting like bright stuff in one ear and dull stuff in the other. Absolutely amazing. Some of the best features in the synth almost completely hidden from you. Just for kicks, because why not? Let's bring Unison back in. Yeah, something else. Finally, pitch bend allows us to specify the pitch bend range, so it's currently set to 2 semitones. It's pretty straightforward what that's going to do. And we can apply pitch bend to oscillator 2 only. Now I don't currently have oscillator 2 engaged, so mashing my pitch bend wheel, having no effect, I'm going to bring oscillator 2 in. There it is. And that's the main synth dealt with. I mean, there are slight variations. Arturia haven't completely replicated. If you see one of these things in the flesh, there are subtle differences, but I think very sympathetically done. The changes that Arturia have made to the original synth are completely in keeping with the spirit of the thing. As always with Arturia products though, you know, we get the extra stuff that's layered on top if you want to use it. And that's what we'll dive into next time. Hope to see you then. Thanks very much for watching.